Well, welcome to Church Planting and Renewal Conversations. I'm Chris Vogel, Director of Next Gen Pastors, and I serve M&A as the Director of Ecosystem Development. October is the month of confluence of two great passions in our country, baseball and football. If a team is going to win, they have coaches. And they're not just for the individual players, but for the team as a whole, be a manager in baseball or a head coach. And so when a team struggles, blame can often be placed on the coach of that team. Well, churches have ministry teams, diaconates, sessions. Have you ever considered the role of a coach for a team in your church? Coaching has been a common topic here in conversations this past year. Last spring, we discussed how coaching helps navigate the soft skills necessary for resilient ministry, and that coaching is not just for church planters, but is a valuable tool for any and all pastors. However, coaching is often perceived to be just a one-to-one engagement. Well, today we're going to discuss coaching for teams. And with us again today is Vincent Torello. He is the M&A's coaching specialist. Well, welcome, Vincent, and tell us a bit more about our topic today.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for that introduction. Welcome, everyone. Really glad that you've chosen to give your time now to this important subject. And the way I'd like to introduce the topic today is to just say that, pastors today are navigating a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. And especially in this post-COVID era. And effective team leadership, effective teams and teamwork will be that which makes all the difference. In this webinar, Coaching for Teams, we are going to consider how team coaching can play a vital role in helping you and your teams, and again, think staff, session, board, ministry teams, how that would help your teams work more efficiently and effectively to deliver meaningful ministry, both inside the team as well as outside to the congregation and the community that you love and serve. And I thought it would be helpful to maybe raise a couple of key issues at the outset to kind of frame our thoughts around this subject. So one would be, how do you get people with different skills, personalities, and even investment to become a dynamic and impactful unit? Second, how can you create greater alignment on your teams? Alignment around vision and mission and values, purpose. Three, what shifts need to be made for you as a leader to lead more as a collective? And then lastly, how can you prepare for the challenges of our VUCA world instead of reacting to them?
Yeah, I think it's when you talk about a VUCA world, it so well describes life in general, but especially these last couple of years, and the effect of the volatility, the uncertainty, the complexity, and just the ambiguous nature of what to do and where to go.
Indeed.
That's well, thank you. So that kind of gives us the outline. We want to get a sense next with everyone here as they've joined us as they're coming in. We like doing polls, want to get a sense. So I'm going to launch a poll here. And this poll, so take a few moments looking at this of unity, alignment, leadership, and approach. So which of these issues is most pressing? So choose one of those in your own context. Now, you mentioned unity and alignment. How are those different? Sometimes I think, well, we're united if we're aligned, or we're aligned if there's unity. How would you distinguish those?
Yeah, so alignment has to do with everyone being aligned or together on what is the purpose, what is the vision and the mission, what are the values, and holding to those, agreeing, getting the buy-in, and then holding to those. Whereas unity is really getting people to work well together. We all have different strengths, we all have different gifts and personalities. How do you value each of those contributions to make a better outcome than the sum of the individual parts.
Yeah. So the idea of alignment, we can not this would ever happen in any of our churches. We may not like each other, but we know where we're going, and we're still going to get there. And so, but on the other hand, we might really get along well together and have good mesh of personalities, but not a clue as to where we're going. But we're having a good time.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
You mentioned a hero leader. How would you define a hero leader?
Yeah, so there's been a huge shift that's been occurring, in the world of leadership over the past 10, 15 years. The hero leader typically is the one who's the cult of personality, very gregarious, does it all, uber competent, and then you have somewhat of passive followers.
Mm-hmm.
And that movement has shifted from that hero leader to a team leader, someone who makes others great.
Okay.
Someone who builds others up, so that what you have is not the person shining in the spotlight, but the team and what they're doing together is actually what's shining in the spotlight.
Oh, that helps. Well, here are the results. So we've about 2/3 answered, and see there 44% said unity. And it'd be interesting to see how this would have looked in 2018 versus in 22. But my experience with a lot of guys, those in ministry of various types, it's the issue of is more unity, getting along together.
Yeah, and it's interesting that the 28% is preparing versus reacting to challenges and changes.
Right.
So being more proactive, and
I think for a lot of us, it's been reaction, and we haven't even had the space, or don't think we have the space to be forward thinking and preparing. Well, good. Next, alignment, and then leadership. Well, good.
Yeah, well, that's good. I'm glad that people are weighing in there, and I'm not that surprised about the unity piece being 44%. How about you, Chris?
Well, what was that? I missed.
I'm not surprised that the unity is so high. Yeah,
I would think so. And again, I think it's the case, but especially right now, because of the division that's in a lot of in our country, in our communities, in our churches, in our leadership teams. It just, we shouldn't be surprised. It's sad, but it is. And that's all the more reason to figure out how can we get back on track and find that which we need. Ken Cross mentioned here, so not everyone is seeing it, but his question was, a hero leader, what we recruit to be a church planter, right? Maybe it's a little cynical, but it's probably pretty true in a lot of cases. The typical planter, if he's high entrepreneurial, he's going to be much more the doer, and he's not going to be, if it's a disc, he's a high D, he's not an S or an SI collaborator in that same sense. Well, great. Well, that's really, really helpful. Well, as we're looking at this here, what you had an illustration that was very helpful, and as you're doing that, I'm going to be bringing someone else in to join us. So why don't you share that illustration?
Absolutely. Yeah, so it's an illustration about the fish and the school of fish, and it goes something like this. So in terms of coaching, you can take a fish out of the school and you coach them up. You do the one-on-one, and they will definitely get stronger and clearer. They'll develop, and their skills will develop. And you take that fish and you put them back into the school of fish, and there will be an impact, on the school to some degree, and they'll be able to function better and be stronger as a leader. But what typically happens is that fish will get pulled back into the system and sort of conform back into the system, and not make as much of an impact or as longer term impact as could be, brought about. Team coaching, on the other hand, kind of coaches the whole school, the system itself, so that what you have has much more chance of longevity, an impact that keeps going and that works itself all the way through.
Great.
So as you're bringing on Allison McAvoy, Allison is a graduate from Gordon College and also has her MBA from the University Metz in France. She's had a successful career in the fashion and sports industries, and that led her to become a professional leadership coach. She's also a good friend, a sister in the faith, and a fine colleague. So welcome, Allison. Thank you for joining us. You'll need to mute yourself.
Oh, it's a joy. I can say that again and again. It's a joy to be here, Chris and Vinny, and those who are here today learning about team coaching. It's an honor to be invited. I consider this work sacred ground, to be honest, because you really get to the heart of the matter of why we're doing what we do. Of course, keeping the people in the pews right in mind, and in your case, and in the corporate way, the customer. And there's a lot of power to coaching. I've been doing this for almost 10 years now, and yeah, glory to God. It's powerful stuff.
Great. Thanks, Allison.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're be able to join with us. Now, when Vincent and I had, started talking about this, it was probably a year or so ago when you brought up this is it's a great tool and one I hadn't really heard before. My immediate thought was, well, isn't that called consulting? I get coached, but if it's a group, you're coming as a consultant. So, Allison, just to help us think it through, how are they, there may be some similarities, but there's obviously some big differences, important ones. How would you describe them?
Sure, absolutely. So there's a big difference between, so a lot of people still need to understand the difference already between counseling and or therapy and coaching, right? And because there is group counseling as well. So there's a difference between that, which is more therapeutic, and they're managing more traumas, right? And then when it comes to consulting, especially in the business area, which is where I had focused the last few years, it's really group coaching tends to a topic, and it can be anybody from any division. So it's not necessarily a team working towards a purpose. So the group coaching is focused on a theme. Like they could be working on time management, they could be working on different strategies, and you never have subordinates in the same room as a group when you're group coaching. It's really achievement to be open. The goal is to keep everybody in a safe environment where they can speak freely and be vulnerable. And then in team coaching, you've got the same vision, the same mission, the same purpose, and you're working to get that engine running as effectively as possible to meet the end needs of whose lives you're touching.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and I would add to that. That's really excellent and helpful clarification, Allison. Is that, the way I understand consulting is someone's an expert, they're coming in and they're going to tell you what needs to happen and how to bring about the change that you desire. And then they leave you to work it out, like, okay, I've given you the imprimatur, now you go make it happen. Team coaching is more about partnering. The team coach comes in to partner with the team in an ongoing relationship to help them ultimately function better together, both inside the team, how they interact, as well as the impact that they're having or the value that they're bringing to those that they're serving. In the context of the church, that would be the congregation and the community at large.
Vinny, if I could just add to that, and that is that the consultant is alike the coaching, where you go in and you do assess where people are at. You want to meet them where they're at. There is an assessment, but then the consultant makes a clear diagnosis, right? And makes a prescription. And then your team is off to design their execution. They might help you with the strategy, design your strategy for execution, but you do all the execution by yourself. And as you said, in team coaching, you're focused on the process. You're creating generative learning. So they're increasing capacity that's generative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. It's right on.
Now, you both have prior to talking about team coaching, you've both done coaching in the context we normally think of, a one-to-one context. What attracted you, each of you, to this idea of team coaching? What was the benefit you saw in your engagement with those that you were coaching?
Yeah, so for me, the attraction was, I'd worked inside of the church since the early 90s as a leader. And I took my role very seriously to work on my own development and so on. But there's a limit to how much you can, in terms of the impact that you can make as a leader, if the system itself doesn't facilitate that same development and growth. And so it was a little bit more of a you figure it out and you make it happen, as opposed to a team approach, which is, no, this is our opportunity. How are we going to rise to that? And so so when I learned that there is a tool out there that can actually facilitate that, I was like, I'm in. Let me get trained in this, and because my desire is to bless the church.
You're kind of sounding like that fish in the school of fish.
Exactly.
Construct.
Yeah, exactly.
That, and because I just know for myself how many times it could be coaching, it could be, reading a good book, it could be a seminar. I get all this great stuff. And now it's my job to try to communicate it to the team I'm working with. It's a trickle down concept that doesn't always work well, because I'm not all that well trained. So yeah. Get everyone in the room. But yeah, Allison,
Yeah, so for me, I come from almost 16 years in corporate. So I'm coming from my experience. I saw very, very bad leadership where people were crushing people's lives and families' lives. And I saw excellent leadership where they were just drawing out people's talents and strengths, and people were joyful and accomplishing their business. And I wanted to learn the difference. So I went to study human behavior, and I saw that team coaching, you could accomplish so much more. The individual matters in team coaching. To make that clear, some corporations are working this in very well. They're teaching coaching cultures where it's a part of their leadership skill set. They must have a coaching skill set to create the generative outcome that they want in every conversation. So when that happens, it brings new life, and it allows people to not just have value statements up on the entrance of the building, but people that are bringing them to life, and they can actually articulate what the behaviors are that are bringing those values to life to accomplish their purpose together, so that the individual profits as well as the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't live unless it was like that.
That's great. So let's say I bring you on, maybe one of you, both of you. Is it ever does a team coach a team? We can get into that. What does it look like? What would be my experience if I were to bring you into our church? And it could be a ministry team, a worship, those overseeing worship, children's ministry session, the deacons. What would the experience be like? What would I expect?
A very positive experience of learning, not only where you're headed in a clear way with clarity, but also understanding really where you are. So we all have blind spots. It's just, we all need each other, right? So we come in and Vinny can speak to you obviously again, but my experience is that you take an assessment and you together partner and see clearly your structure and your system. So that creating that unity that with wherever the gaps or the gains are, and you look at that and you create a structure and a system that allows that to grow in a way that's designed well. Then you move in from team design into team process, and which is feedback and feedback loop strategy. And then there's team agency. So it goes from design, process, and then agency. And the agency piece is where people are really generatively learning and learning these skills to give to everybody else. So it's that's what you could expect. So you would set markers for success, and you would evaluate that at the end. So where are you? And you would get clear, concrete, measurable results that are clearly aligned with your values. That's the key thing, is being able to articulate how you're holding the process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I speak from a corporate mindset of obviously, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. So just to add to that, a team coaching engagement would start with, some kind of inquiry, scoping, trying to understand, as Allison put it, where is the team now, and where does that team need to be? What is the moment right now, the congregation, the community, the opportunity calling you to step up to right now, but not just right now, but in 1 year, in 5 years, so that you're not still functioning from last year's purpose, mission, value, and so on. So, we would come in and we would try to understand and try to help draw out what are the internal dynamics. How clear are you on roles and goals and the rules of engagement? How do you all like to communicate and stay current? How to make the most out of your meeting times, right? And to take into consideration not just how it's going within the team, but what would those you're serving say about how you're doing, and how you communicate and so on, so that you can begin to understand, what is the people that we're influencing and who are influencing us. What is that? What's really going on there?
So there would be a place that you would want to find out not just how the team is functioning, but how the team is functioning over those that they're working with. You want feedback, so it's not just in one direction.
That's right. And and we would help a team to determine, is that the kind of thing that you all should do? Should you drum up? Well, we would help you create the questions, but do you go and interview some key folks, or is that something that we would do, and then share that? But the thing is it occurs in a safe and non-judgmental kind of environment. This is not a aha, we got you kind of thing. It's, how can this be beneficial? How can this build up the church and gather in the lost people of this world in a way that is actually a delight, as you work together?
Amen. And just to give a concrete example to somebody who's already using it, the healthcare system is now, for example, some hospitals that I've coached at, they're assessing the patient's experience, right? So that's one example. But how can you do that, top of mind, day to day, as you're running, leading your days? One way is in your team meetings, right, Vinny? We know, put an extra chair. You have an extra chair there, an empty chair. I don't know if anyone's ever done that, but that's who you're talking to. They're in your meeting, so they're top of mind to keep that perspective, right? Because we're all seeking to have this perspective, fresh perspective of each other, in order to serve, as we're obviously looking to align for God's perspective most of all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is there a degree of healthy functionality that is necessary to do this? I'm looking at the poll that we did: unity, alignment, leadership, and approach. If you walk in and there isn't even unity among the team, they might be able to say what their vision and their mission is, but it's just not healthy as a team function in unity. Are you able to speak into that?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. You want to speak to that, Allison?
Sure. I'd love to say absolutely yes. It doesn't matter where they're at. What would need to happen early on in the first 1 or 2 sessions is the willingness to create what I call a psychological safety, where we could actually look at that honestly, because it's painful to look where it's not comfortable. Yeah. So our commitment to confidentiality and our commitment for the common good of each person there, it's just, like I said, when I started, it's sacred ground. And so you're there, you can meet an unhealthy team if they're willing to be honest and they're willing to work and you have alignment with the leader. Mm-hmm. So there's a sense of buy-in and responsibility and ownership for the common good to go through the growing pains together, because at the other end, you're all going to be really successful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's so important to identify that when you enter into a team coaching engagement, the client, if you will, is the team. It's not any one person on the team, but the team collectively and each individual on that team. And so if there is some dysfunction, which, you know, invariably in systems there is, right?
Everywhere.
we do believe in original sin, I believe. So
You would be out of work if we didn't have dysfunction.
So would a whole host of others,
Yeah.
right? Pastors included.
Yeah.
You know, we'd all be good. But yeah, but absolutely there would be a context to facilitate that. And early on, there would be some level of commitment. How willing are you to change?
Mhm.
You know, how open and willing are you to change? Because if there isn't either of that, then that is a game changer, and it would be hard to make progress.
Yeah. Michael Chung asked a question here. He says, is there a fit between the coach and the team? Are certain coaches more suitable for certain teams because of their skill sets and experiences and personality? So how you know, how much does it, that connection, what does that look like? How do you determine it as you walk into a situation?
Great question, Michael. Thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, that's a real issue. You know, there has to be chemistry. You have to feel confident in the coach's skill, and the coach needs to be honest about whether they can actually be of help. And some of that happens up front. You know, you determine whether that's the case or not. And, you know, you just have a candid conversation about that. What is it that you're looking for? What is it that I or we do? And is that a good fit or not? It's very important. You agree with that, Allison?
I completely agree with that. Best practice in selecting your coach is to interview 3, right? And the number one principle of any authentically ethic and morally operating coach would be to be candid. And it might not be a good fit for them either if they're not aligned with the values or the purpose. So they've got to be that way if they're professional. And I would say that you're really looking to build trust. So if you cannot establish trust from the get-go, you're wasting your time and investment.
How important is this? Goes from coaching, specific coaching, but also coaching teams. How important is it that the coach, whether individual or team, has shared experience as opposed to skill set and the chemistry, if that makes sense? Is that I'm looking for a coach. Does he have to understand, this old fat boomer who's been a pastor for 30 years and has to have all these experiences, type of a thing, to put it that way?
Well, I'll jump in on that. I mean, a professional coach should be able to coach anybody. They don't have to necessarily identify in life experience with that person. They do have to identify with that person and really respect who they are and where they are and what that life experience is all about. And if they can't do that, then it's definitely not a good fit.
Yeah.
But I think a pro should be able to rise to that opportunity.
In professional coach training, so this is a profession that basically started only 25 years ago. There, obviously, it's been in different professions in one way, but formalized into a profession and perfected with the training, it's been 25 years. So the top professionals, absolutely, that's what they're trained to do. And it really is a matter of building trust in that safe environment so that the partnership can create this. And it's always, we're sworn to a code of ethics, which you are always looking at the client's agenda. We bring tools, we bring a plethora of tools that we're trained in. We are honest, we look at what we see things that maybe you don't like, that you like, and we ask you about it, and you make the decisions. And then together, we build your strategy of how you want to accomplish what you want to accomplish this year, right? So it's yes, and yes, but it's a matter of trust and authenticity. There are good lawyers and bad lawyers. There are good coaches and bad coaches.
Yeah. Great. Well, so just talk a little bit more then specifically, what are some of the benefits from team coaching? We've talked about the VUCA world, the volatile, see if I can do this from memory, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. I think
Yeah.
You
Nice
got it.
job, Chris. Nice job.
It's the life I live. That describes my home so many times.
Yes.
So what are the benefits? What would one expect then that can come through this or out of this opportunity?
Yeah, well, with that, it definitely can help a team address the challenges of a VUCA world, as you put it, and adapt to those changes. Can help you to develop better processes for decision making and strategy and prioritizing. Right? There's always so many things, good things to do. How do you determine which to do first and then second and so on? It would help, communicating and organizing the ministry, how to work more effectively as a team, how to take into consideration those you influence and who influence you, and to really value what's called the stakeholders, all the key stakeholders. It would also help to give greater clarity on your purpose, and even becoming future fit, as I referred to earlier. Where do we need to be 5 years from now? What is the church and the world calling us to rise up to in that time span, so that we can meet it?
Yeah, absolutely, Vinny. And in addition to that, I firmly believe that with the clarity that you gain from being able to articulate where you're at, what the values are, what the valuable goals are, and going through the pain of taking off the table and saying, not this year to these, because a good strategic plan definitely is pruning out what we can't get to this year, because we preserve quality, right? So you want to preserve quality of achieving the goals that you clearly have. And then you learn that about yourself as well, healthy boundaries for yourself, so that you have peace of mind. Oh, I should have got to this, I should have got to that. No, you're going to sleep, you're renewing yourself, right? And I have found both individually and as teams that become more effective, and simply being able to articulate clearly how they're operating together, even with those dysfunctions, already they're gaining more peace of mind, and which fuels them. It helps them identify how they can turn on their agency, right? Which is God-given. So they're turning on their agency. They're working with the discrepancies and the differences in a very powerful way. And just bringing that to that clarity really is helpful to the resilience and the focus of what is possible to achieve. There's so many, the feedback loop alone, just not being isolated, that feedback loop, that positive feedback loop that gives you a trained perspective of clarity. You're missing this, you're not seeing this, you are seeing this, you're over identifying over here, but that's your choice. It might be necessary for the season. So there's just so many benefits. Honestly, I could go on for an hour, Chris, on the benefits of team coaching. So cut me off now.
Oh, so kind of the nuts and bolts, people will often wonder, okay, what's the time frame? What does it look like? So we engage, is it, face to face via Zoom for an hour, 3 times? You can take care of all the problems in the team. What does it look like and feel like if I were to bring you on to work with me and my team?
Great question, Chris. Yeah. A lot of that happens in the scoping conversation, where you're kind of talking about what's really going on and what do you see. And the thing that I love about team coaching is I'm not coming in saying, or, Allison and I aren't coming in and saying, here's what you need to do. It's co-created. We co-create the process. Let's try to understand what's going on. That's the inquiry stage, right? And then once we're through the inquiry stage and we have some data, some feedback, then we take that and we say, okay, so then what do we want to do with this to make a development? So we make a development stage, right? And then you figure that out. So it's more jazz than it is Baroque. So yeah.
Coming from a musician, thank you for that
Yeah.
And if we go back to the medical analogy, so Atul Gawande, who worked with the World Health Organization in developing an operational surgical room checklist, which didn't exist, it saved several lives, right? So we come in and we do a checklist. We help you create that. So it could be very simple, very small, but it gets you all in the same alignment with your clarity of your mission and your purpose for that season.
Yeah.
So it's a wellness check, and it just creates vitality. It truly creates, not only for the individuals, but for the organisms, the team.
Yeah. Yeah. And as far as the time frame, or even the way it goes, nowadays with Zoom and people's, being all spread out and so on, it can be very effective to do team coaching via, internet platform. You can still do it, and you can do it live. It kind of depends on the budget and the schedules and all that kind of stuff. So again, it's something that's kind of talked through and figured out in terms of what's going to best serve this team at this time.
But I am sensing it would be more than 2 meetings and you can fix all my problems.
Yeah, I think the rule of thumb is that 6 months is a really low engagement, and 9 months is maybe more realistic.
Okay.
9 to 12 months.
That helps.
Yeah. And you asked a question we didn't answer earlier, Chris, and that is, generally speaking, team coaching is done by 2 people because of the tremendous dynamic that's happening amongst the individuals. To train it, and they will have a different perspective. And also we have blind spots, so we will see things that others don't. So it's great to work with people who are very different and have different backgrounds to actually capture the whole of the alignment for the team. And generally a year. I mean, generally the companies I've worked with, group coaching works fine for 6 months, but team coaching is really better off. I've never done less than 9 months. It's usually a year or 2.
Yeah. Okay.
And to Michael Chung's question, that would be the goal. There is a season where you outgrow the coach.
Yeah. Let's repeat the question, because they won't see this after it's taped. But yeah.
Oh, forgive me.
No, that's fine.
So yes, Michael asks, is the goal to eventually graduate from the coach, or is it good to have an ongoing relationship indefinitely? And the answer would be, it depends on the season, and people have different coaches for different things, right? You can even have a baseball coach or a football coach, right, Chris? The convergence of October you kicked us off with. But you can have a coach for different things. And many people will have, one for spirituality and one for business. I'm just talking in another world, for example. But it depends on the season and what you're focused on, right? You might have experienced a trauma. There might have been, a death in your family. You would need to see a therapist and potentially see a coach at the same time. So it depends on the season. I know several very successful leaders that always have a coach. It's not that they're looking to graduate. They're always looking to become their very best, just like Atul Gawande, the surgeon I mentioned earlier.
Yeah. Well, when we think of just it's an analogy, it's not always perfect, but when we think of athletes, the higher level the athlete, the more coaches he or she has.
Yep. A nutrition coach, a sleep coach.
Yeah, everything. Now at that level, they can also afford it, but that's a whole nother.
That's correct.
Part of it. So no good. Well, one question I had though is, I'm thinking in a church context. Again, we're talking about the VUCA world. Everything is changing. But by nature of a church, it's changing. Church teams change. It's made up of volunteers, and they're in for a season, they're out. Sessions, elders rotate on and off. How does team coaching take into effect that element of the internal change that so often happens, and doesn't even take into account the world that's changing around us? But what advice do you have for a church when they're thinking about coaching in the midst of change?
Yeah, that's a solid question as well. And, the way I would answer that is, there is some transience, and with volunteers and, rotating on and rotating off of boards and sessions and things like that. And if that were the case in the midst of a team coaching engagement, that would be disruptive. But I think what happens is in the team coaching engagement, you learn tools and skills to ask better questions, to set up better processes, to consider roles and contributions of the whole, getting all the voices heard in the room, and incorporating stakeholder input, my term. And those are transferable, no matter who's on the team. Those are good practices for creating a healthy, dynamic, value-creating system.
Chris, I think it's an excellent question. And I can assure you, with the proper coaches, if it was one meeting that an elder sat at, they would have been equipped to do something better. Even if they were leaving and transitioning out, they would already have gained value from the one session. And for the glory of God, right? And the other thing is that we can design a system with a protocol. Coming from my organizational development background, you design a protocol for that. So there's best practices for if someone's there one or two times and how you manage that. And we can just put that on a sheet. It can be part of the practice.
Under the Q&A box, David, you had asked a question. He says less practical, but I think it's a great question. What do you guys think has contributed to this greater need for third-party coaching? In previous generations, I imagine this type of coaching would fall under discipleship or mentorship of pastors and church leaders. What do you guys think contributed to this greater need?
I have philosophies on that, but Vinny, do you want to go first?
No, please, go ahead.
Yeah. The reason why the need has increased in our generation, I believe, is because of the societal changes in culture, the needs and the pressures that are put on our pastors, on the men that are in our churches. It's not like any other culture we've existed in. And the sense of isolation and loneliness in leadership in and of itself, wherever you are, is real. And the corporate leaders are getting funded a lot of money to have people do not only outside third-party coaching, but also internally with not only used to be annual reviews with process feedback. They're not only doing quarterly, they're doing monthly reviews to give people feedback to help them build themselves up. They're investing in development, really deliberate development plans. And if anyone else needs it in our time more, it would be our pastors. That's my point of view. I just think it's the needs in our culture, especially in America, have changed. And it's a matter of time. And when we do individual coaching, we look at make sure that, the days are, you're incorporating your self-care. We talked about that before, self-discipline, self-care. And this is really something to increase also in the team coaching.
I mean, the area that I focus in on a lot is the issue of mentorship. And what I find, sadly, is few pastors have mentors. They may have had someone early, but they don't have someone speaking into their life. And they've got friends in ministry, but it's not the same in type of engagement. So having that person with experience speaking into their life is unfortunately rare. It may well have been at a greater degree in the past. We had more of an apprenticeship kind of tract, I think, in the context of ministry. As ministry has become more professional in many ways and self-directed, it also has increased that loneliness and that isolation. So I think we can say, well, we should have a different system, but we don't. This is the world we're in. And I think, like you mentioned, Allison, is especially at this time, the polls showing 30% of pastors and then over the next 2 years will consider not leaving their church, but leaving ministry. And we're not equipped as we thought we were to be able to handle it. And so that's where this idea, bringing in other properly professional and voices who can speak into that context that are not pure profession, in the sense of it, that it's cold or sterile, but professional in the sense of they understand to the proper degree ministry and its pressures and can speak into that.
Yeah.
That's right.
You, Vinny, we're kind of at a good point, I think, to talk about kind of for those who are listening, next steps for them. What would let's move to that.
Yeah, so I'd love to set up just an exercise you can begin to work on, and then you can take it with you, sort of like, we'll get you going and you can think about it. But what I'd love for each of you to do is to just pick a team either that you're on or that you lead, that you would like to work better together. And then secondly, write down the name of that team, the people who are on it. You don't have to put last names or anything like that. We're not trying to out anybody. It's just more to just get your mind around what that team is and makeup and stuff. Then third, what would success look like if that team were to work better together? What do you envision? What do you see different? What would the improvement be? Fourth, what would need to improve in order for that change to occur? As you think about that team, what are some of the spots that would need to shift or develop or be removed for that to happen? And then number 5, how open are you to change as the team leader in order for this to come about? You can rate yourself 0 to 10. 10, I'm totally there, sign me up. 0 being you're crazy, nice idea.
I mean, the first 4 are the easy ones. When you ask me how open am I to change, now you're getting personal.
Starting to meddle there.
Yeah. So for those are with us, think through that and encourage you, make use of the chat box or the Q&A box. Kind of let us know what you're thinking, or any questions that come out of those that would help you kind of move the ball forward.
Yeah.
Or kind of, it is, as people are thinking about this and hopefully posting some questions or some thoughts. The one thing I think is amazing is, in a context of a church of almost any size, the number of teams that are there. It's not just the leadership team, not just the pastoral staff, office staff, the elders, the deacon, however it's structured, but so many teams and their functionality is of varying sorts. And then to be able to think and dream, what does success look like? If you really could script it, what would it be? And I think sometimes we're afraid to go there because it can become pure fantasy. But if we don't do that, we won't move very far. All right.
So this can be a processing here live. You can put some things in the chat box, ask any clarifying questions, or it can be a project you take with you and just kind of begin to think about, what would it be like if I engaged in some team coaching, or at least some good questions to help move these teams along to address the unity issue that was 44%.
Yeah.
And begin to move in a good direction in that regard, instead of feeling stuck,
Yeah.
And as people take that away, perhaps to reflect on number 3, what would success look like? I would just invite them to think for a moment, as Chris said, as they're dreaming, just imagine, if you have all the resources that you need, like, don't imagine limitations, like, get yourself out of that and to think freely, what would it look like if I had all the resources? What would the success really be like? Yeah. And then you'd be surprised.
One question that was posted here, and again, I think it's depends on how we're wired. For some of us, it is so easy. I think for a lot of us at times, so
Yeah.
easy to focus and fixate on what's wrong. We don't even have the space or the desire or the energy to dream what could be. Why dream what can be when I'm face to face with other problems?
Because it fuels and regenerates you. That's the real reason, and that is the crux of coaching. The I'm not sure if I should mention any of the research on neuroscience. I mean, that is true. We all tend to go to the negative side, the parts of our brains, because we're trained that way, survival. And we need to then choose to use another piece of our brain in order to go into discovery and exploration mode, in order to be creative and innovative. So we want to open up that, but you have to get yourself into a free, safe place, and you have to see the value in it.
Yeah.
Right. So if you don't have the experience of going there thinking, oh, this is worthwhile, you're going to say, oh, I'm wasting my time. But
Yeah.
we've
And
seen
as we have
successful, right, Vinny?
yeah. And as we have shared so many times, you and I, Allison, what does the Apostle Paul say in Philippians 4? Whatever's true, whatever is noble, think on these things, right? And right, exactly. So, I mean, it's right there. Exactly.
Go there for your fuel. It's real.
It reminds me of a thing I recently saw, a study that was done. You're talking, Allison, about this, reminded me of it. Watching 8 minutes of negative news first thing in the morning, there's like an 80% higher rate of negative thoughts 8 hours later, a continuing pattern. Now, that doesn't mean just think happy thoughts, but it does mean if that's what's coming in, it has a long-term effect.
It absolutely does, Chris. That point that you raised is very important. Awareness, and to design your days accordingly, right? Lead your mornings are critical to how your days are spent. You wake up in the morning when your brain is sleeping and it's in a certain wave zone, and what you put on it first in the morning is critical.
So here's a question in dealing with a team. Would say, ask, what if the change that is being asked of you by the session or members in the church, not the coaches, what if that change is a desire to align in a direction that feels inward and wrong to my soul?
That's tough.
So you walk into a team and you see this divergence, that it gets to some of the fundamental core issues of calling and purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. And we call that out to intelligent, compassionate conversation. And I've seen that with subsidiaries to headquarter companies where they're not understanding the needs, and you just bring it into a very concise conversation that brings clarity, and often we can find alignment because the values are completely aligned. So.
Yeah. So, and we as coaches would facilitate that conversation, not have it for you or step in and make it right, but to facilitate and prepare you to bring that inner turmoil that you experience out into the open and have an honest conversation about it.
Yeah, the benefit of having a third party coming in and helping the session, the members of the church, may not ultimately affect change, but bring it out and just saying, do you realize this pastor is feeling so conflicted that he's having to violate core principles? And hopefully they go, well, we didn't intend that. Or if they say, yeah, he should, well, then the coaching might need to help the person move on to the next place.
Yeah.
And Vinny said earlier, it's the team that's the client.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That is a helpful thing to realize. You're coming in not just to back up the pastor and make sure he succeeds in his plans, but the team as a whole. And I think I would say as a pastor, understanding that's going to be critical, because if I'm the one bringing you in and convincing this room to move forward with this, I want to win.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder if now would be a good time to ask the participants to put in the chat box something that is standing out to them from today's webinar on coaching for teams? What would be the highlight or the takeaway or the thing that really is standing out to you from our webinar today? If you can put those in the chat box, that would be great.
It's always good to hear the takeaways, because it helps others to think along those lines too.
Exactly.
Yeah, fishing gold. Fishing analogy is gold. Yeah, when you shared that with me the other day last week, I went, wow, yeah, that makes perfect sense.
That's actually what won me to the team, because it was a 2-year program, and I was like, oh, I got to commit to this thing for 2 years. And the presenter gave that illustration. I was like, okay, that does it. Now I got to figure out how to do this for the next 2 years.
as others are. Oh, go ahead, Allison.
No, and I would say, and Vinny has figured out how to do that brilliantly. And as his colleague, I mean, like I said earlier, I'm honored to have been asked by him to be here. He's a tremendous coach and a tremendous pastor. And I think bringing someone like Vinny, who's uniquely skilled in this way, who has such a compassionate way of being professional with the sessions, I think he would be ideal to bring in. I just highly recommend. Are we offering anything, Vinny? Are you giving a link to?
Yeah,
I'm free or something? Yeah.
I'll post that in a minute. But no, thank you. And there is a question here about where you got your coaching from, Vinny. I'd ask you to shoot me some of that info rather than just describing it here. And after we're done, I send out all the information, the links and everything else, and the link to this video. If you registered, you'll have all that info. But we got just a few minutes left and want to be able to get to those opportunities. I want to just kind of close this as an encouragement to those that are listening with this. One of the objections that will often come from pastors, and especially from sessions, is going to be time and cost, because there is an investment. And it's the thing that always comes to my mind is when I would be dealing with a couple whose marriage is in disarray, and say, you as a couple need counseling. And they go, well, we're managing it and the kids don't notice. And I'm going, you don't know they don't notice. My gut feeling is they do. And yes, it's going to cost you $100, $150, $200 an hour to work through this. And you spent 20 years getting into this mess. You're not going to get out of it in 3 counseling sessions, but it's worth the investment. And I say the same thing to churches, to sessions. None of us as pastors, as leaders, as teams get into our messes overnight. We take good time to dig the hole deep, and to get out takes a lot of time too. And so understanding, having that kind of a family diagnostic to the whole process can be very helpful. And so I would encourage you that there is this opportunity. And Allison, you were mentioning an opportunity just to begin to connect.
Absolutely. And I think Vinny has a link to sign up for some time with him, and just to explore, to understand more, because it is something new. Unfortunately, in today's time, at seminary, leaders aren't taught leadership coaching skills right now. And we may see a day, again, it's only 25 years old, right, Vinny? What do you think about that?
I'm all for it.
some courses on generative coaching skills, right, for leadership coaching skills, because it can profoundly change the effectiveness and the resiliency of leadership today.
Yeah, so I invite you. I offer a complimentary 30-minute call to explore if team coaching or one-to-one coaching is the right next step for you or your team. I'd be happy to. There's a Calendly link that you can follow on the landing page, and find a time that works for you. I'd be happy to meet with you and to see where that goes. And as far as the coaching skills, we're actually thinking in November that we will do a webinar, coaching skills for pastors, Wednesday, November 10th, same time, 2 to 3 Eastern. And so I think that's the next offering. And of course, you're all invited and welcome.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, thank you so very much. And we'll also say that's November 10th. On November 3rd, again, we're dealing with church planting and renewal, kind of the life of the church. We'll be hearing little bit of a different track about what's happening in Florida, some exciting opportunities there. And so I'll be hearing stories from church planting, the Florida Church Planting Network with Drew Bennett and others. That's November 3rd. So you can sign up for those as well. Again, thank you so much, Allison, for joining us.
Thank you.
For
Thank you,
this
Allison.
time. This was great. Look forward to some more conversations in the future and see where that leads us. So one and all, we appreciate you joining us to M&A Church Planting and Renewal Conversations. Bye.
Thank you.